Perfect. Thank you very much. So thank you, JB. Thank you for having me. Like you said, I'll be running through a few points around building your Salesforce career and navigating your job search. So this isn't targeted specifically to Marketing Cloud. I guess enthusiasts. This is kind of quite general in topic in terms of the Salesforce ecosystem as a whole and how people can approach different paths. So who am I? So as JB said, I'm Ben Duncombe. I'm the founder of Talent Hub, and we are a Salesforce recruitment business based in Australia. We also have a Salesforce-focused podcast called Talent Hub Talk, which can be found on all of the main podcast platforms. And in that, we interview Salesforce specialists at all different levels to talk about their career journeys. So positioning yourself in the Salesforce market. Obviously, I'm expecting that most people on this call are passionate about Salesforce and looking for a career. And it's a career section. It's a place that's in demand. We see a lot of demand for Salesforce professionals. But what I've noticed over the last 6 years is that there are a lot of pathways and a lot of job titles. So when I first started, I'd kind of focus on hiring for maybe 5 or 6 different job titles. But as the last few years have evolved, we've seen more and more and more. You get the point, but lots and lots of different job titles coming into the ecosystem. Now, like I said, this isn't specific to Marketing Cloud, but I could even add more if I went specific to certain products or clouds. So these are the roles that we come across kind of on a daily basis now. And as you can see, the ecosystem is just growing and growing. So it can be quite intimidating when you're looking to start a career as to kind of identifying which path you want to go down and understanding what each of the different roles do. So I'm not going to run through each job title now, but just this slide hopefully gives you some insight into there are so many different paths out there. So many different job titles that you can consider. And if you don't fit the mold for the kind of core job titles that you see day to day, like the Salesforce admin, the Salesforce developer, the functional consultant, architect, project manager, then have a think about some of the skill sets that are in and around the ecosystem as well, and potentially which other skills or job titles might align to your background. So the core message around that is not to get overwhelmed. Looking at a big list of different job titles and kind of identifying which path you want to go down can be overwhelming. But the key is to play to your strengths. So work out what your strengths are and what you're passionate about, and don't just chase the volume of jobs. So kind of on a daily basis, I'll get someone that reaches out to me that's looking to move into the Salesforce ecosystem. And they'll say, Ben, I see so many jobs for Salesforce developers. Should I be a Salesforce developer? And I ask them if they've ever coded before or if they think they can become passionate about coding. And quite often the answer is no, for both. So have they coded before, but do they think they can become passionate about coding? And if they don't, then the honest answer is that they shouldn't be a Salesforce developer. That's where potentially the most volume is in the market at the moment, but that doesn't mean that's the right career path for you. So think about what you're passionate about and what your strengths are, and then align those to the Salesforce market and pursue your career down that path. The best way to identify which role is right for you is to look at the kind of roles that you think might be suitable, and then to reach out to people in the ecosystem that are performing those roles, and reach out and ask them about what they do on a daily basis. Ask them, what a typical day looks like for them and what they enjoy about the role, potentially what they don't enjoy. The best thing about the Salesforce ecosystem is that people are willing to give their time. So if you reach out to someone and ask some honest, open questions, you'll be surprised at how many people are willing to share their view and their career stories to help you kind of plan your career in the long run. If you identify that you want to be an architect, as an example, it's really important that you also see which potential stepping stones can help you get there. It's great to identify the end role, but there's so many other roles in the ecosystem that could potentially lead you down that path. So let's say you want to be an architect one day. Well, that might mean that you have to become an admin first and then move into being a functional consultant and then a solution architect. So look at the different stepping stones that are career could evolve from and ultimately lead you to your end goal. And then from those conversations with potential people that you want to go on and pursue a career that they're currently doing, you need to identify the gaps that you need to work on and then start working on them. So they'll be able to identify what they do on a daily basis, and then you can kind of see where your gaps potentially are and where you may struggle if you were to be in that role today. And then it's all about action. Without the action, you're never going to get there. So it's identifying what you need to do and how you can start forming those habits or skills so that eventually you can take that path. That means non-technical gaps too, such as stakeholder management, negotiation, and prioritization. So we see a lot of candidates, a lot of job seekers that spend 99% of their time on Trailhead. And Trailhead is an absolutely fantastic tool, but there are other skills out there that you need to evolve and develop. And a lot of those can't be done on Trailhead. So think about the non-technical gaps that are potentially holding you back right now too. And I know part of this series, there's other talks on building a personal brand, and I won't go too deep on this topic, but personal brands are something I'm really, really passionate about, and something that I think can add a lot of value. And where I've seen a lot of success for people in the past when they're looking to build out their Salesforce career is by starting to blog or to document their Salesforce career journey on things like LinkedIn and Twitter, which really, really does help build your personal brand. It shows that you're passionate about Salesforce. It shows that you can do what you say you can do, because you're talking about little things you've potentially built in a developer org, as an example, little mini projects that you've been developing in your own time. And I've seen lots of examples of where people have started to do this. And what that enables them to do is start to get some inbound opportunities rather than just relying on applying for different jobs on job boards. I've seen many examples where people have created their own personal brand online, and that's led to job opportunities coming their way, not them having to apply for opportunities themselves. So start early, start building your personal brand as soon as possible, and get creative around how you use a Salesforce developer org if that's relevant to the skill set you have and the market that you're looking to go down, and start building a personal brand online, because that's really going to help with your longer term job search. So working with recruiters, I think I'm sure a lot of you will have come across recruiters online before, and probably had some dealings with recruiters in a previous life, whether that's in the Salesforce world or in other technologies or career paths. I think the main thing to know here for any Salesforce job seeker is to understand that there are different types of recruiters. So the three that I can think of off the top of my head are, you have internal recruiters. So imagine if you want to work at Facebook, Facebook will have an internal recruitment team that would from time to time potentially look for Salesforce professionals. Then you have generalist recruiters. So these are the recruiters that recruit, they're external, they're not tied to a specific business that hires for Salesforce professionals, but they might hire for Java developers, Salesforce professionals, .NET developers, cybersecurity specialists. They kind of cover lots of different markets. And then you have specialists, so people that only recruit in the Salesforce ecosystem. So I would put myself in the specialist category because I don't recruit for anything other than Salesforce. And then in the US, I can think of a number of people that fit into the specialist category as well. Working with recruiters, you have to realize that with each of these three different recruitment types, you would operate and work with them in a different way. So someone that works for Facebook, you have to build a different kind of relationship with to someone that's a generalist recruiter and someone that's specialist, because they have kind of different needs at different times, and they'll have a different volume of Salesforce opportunities. So I think if you target the specialist recruiters, the people that want to or are continually looking for Salesforce professionals, even before you're ready to move or ready to start to applying for opportunities, you need to start building relationships with these people. And the key here is to be persistent. So identify people in the target markets that you want to work in, if that's Marketing Cloud, if that's core Salesforce, even if it's in a specific location, if you're looking to work on the West Coast, identify recruiters that can help with that, and then start building relationships and identifying ways you can work together. Recruiters typically reach out to the people that they remember first. when a client comes to me and has a requirement, that my first thought is, who do I know for this role? My first thought isn't, can I put a job on a job board? Can I put an advert on a job board and see who comes back? So this is where your personal brand really helps, because if I've seen you posting about something that you've built in a developer org recently, and that's in my mind, when a client comes to me and says, Ben, we're looking for someone that can build a Lightning web component, and I've seen you do that in a developer org and post onto LinkedIn recently, you'll be the first person I think of. And speed is often a key driver for my clients. They're looking for people quickly. Therefore, the quicker I can identify the right talent, the better it is for everyone. So this is why having ongoing relationships with recruiters is important, but also having a personal brand where recruiters will remember you. So I think a perception that a lot of people have is that every job that is in the market is on a job board, but that strictly isn't true. So over the last 5 years, I've personally placed 202 different Salesforce professionals into a role, and I've never put a job on a job board. So I've never once advertised a job on a job board. There are reasons for that, but the main reason for me is that it's my role is very relationship led, and very few candidates that are suitable for the roles that we're advertising are on job boards right now. So yeah, I think that's a key message, is not every job is on a job board. Therefore, just applying for jobs through job boards isn't a job search strategy. It's just one part of a job search strategy. And then for the roles that are advertised, I think it's another misconception that you have to meet 100% of requirements on that job spec. So it's very, very rare that I will place a candidate into a role that meets 100% of the requirements that a client has. So don't fear applying for a job if you don't meet all of the bullet points on that specific role. If you feel that you're confident and comfortable that you can deliver the role that's on the job description, then I would put your name forward and put your best foot forward, because more often than not, a company aren't going to find someone that meets 100% of their requirements. And my next message around working with recruiters is to understand that not every recruiter understands the market that they recruit in, which, it's a shame. I wish they did. But the key message there is, even if you're working with a recruiter that has a Salesforce job, they don't necessarily understand the job, nor do they understand your skill set. So it's really important that you ensure they understand why you're a good match for the role. So this means that if you don't do this, there's a good chance they're going to put your CV or your resume forward and not necessarily give you the best chance of getting the job. So before any recruiter sends your CV to a client, I would ask them, how will you explain to your client that I am a strong fit for this role, and see what they say. It's really important that you take charge of your own job search and your own applications. And if the recruiter can't articulate why they think you're a good candidate for the role, how are they going to say that to their client? And it's really important that you coach them through that to make sure that the client's getting the right message around your skill set and why you should be considered for this job. The other thing that I think are really important are the details of each role. So quite often I'll speak to a candidate that's looking to build their career in Salesforce, and they're really keen just to apply for any position. And it's detrimental if you're applying for every job, because you're not going to be suitable for every job, but also not every job is going to be suitable for you. So not all roles are equal. We might have 2 Salesforce Marketing Cloud campaign manager jobs, and one may be so much better for you than the other. And by asking the right questions, that's how you identify which roles are actually suitable for you. So a lot of these details won't end up on a job description, so it makes it really difficult for you to see by just looking at 2 job descriptions which one is right for you. So by working with a recruiter, or even that it could be an internal recruiter, it could be a generalist, it could be a specialist, or it could even be just directly with the line manager that's reached out to you. Try to understand things like how many users there are, who else will be in the team, will you have support from others, or are you going to be a lone ranger where you kind of have to work things out on your own? Which clouds and products are being used? Is this going to actually help launch your career further, or are you just going to be working on things you've already worked on? Is the company invested in Salesforce? Are they having plans to add more products in the future? Will you work on projects or BAU? How mature is the org? Is it greenfield? Is it a brand new project? And are there other teams that you will work with, such as offshore? So these are the kind of questions that I would want to be asked by a candidate, and when they're looking to build out their Salesforce job search, and when I have an opportunity to present to them. But I find that a lot of people that are looking to build their career don't necessarily ask these questions because they're just keen to apply for as many roles as possible. And it's really, really, really important to understand that not every role is going to be right for you. So make sure you're putting your best foot forward and targeting the ones that are actually going to help build your career. So your resume and LinkedIn. So here I have two examples of the same job. These are completely made up. I'm not a Salesforce developer, but they're two different ways of explaining a role. I don't know if there's any way I can, like I said, I'm not a Zoom specialist, so I don't know if I can ask anyone to put their hand up, or, but I can see a few people on the video. So who thinks option 1 on the left-hand screen would be better than option 2 on your CV when you're describing a role that you've conducted over the last, say, year? Is there a hand up option or?
I think you can use the reactions button over there. Yeah.
Okay, I can't. Like I said, I'll. I'm not the Zoom pro, but my honest answer is, I see a lot of option 2 on resumes. I see a lot of people just listing tasks and responsibilities, and I think a lot of people fall into the trap of they've heard that your CV should only be one page long, your resume should only be 1 page long, and then there's very, very little context to what they've done. So I probably read, 25 to 50 CVs a day, and you'll be surprised how many of them look like option 2 there, where there's very, very little context. I have to really kind of just try and make sense of what they've actually achieved in the role, and without picking up the phone and really diving into detail with the particular candidate, I wouldn't actually know what part in that work they've delivered. So option 1 there gives a real insight into actually what they were responsible for, what the environment is, so what they've worked on, what could be relevant to the new company from the previous experience, and then some achievements, which I think are really, really important. If I'm reading this CV, I get a really good sense of what someone's actually been able to do themselves, and what they've learned in that role, and what they've been able to achieve for the business that they were working for. So my key message here is I've never actually stopped reading a resume just because it was longer than 1 page. Now, in an ideal world, if you could get all of the relevant information on 1 page, that would be absolutely amazing. But quite often you can't. And if that means that you have to go on to 2 or 3 pages, that's absolutely okay. But as long as the information you have on your resume is relevant, as soon as you start talking about something you were doing 15 years ago that has no kind of alignment to the role you're applying for, then it's not relevant. So yeah, make sure that everything on your resume is well targeted to the jobs you're applying for. Give some really good detail around what you do, what you can do, and what you're looking to do, and actually what you've achieved. Give some context to what you've achieved for another company, and then what you can potentially achieve for the company you're working with. So yeah, the other message I have here in the bullet points is make sure your role clearly aligns to the job that you want to do and the job that you actually did from a Salesforce perspective. So I understand that you might not be called a Salesforce administrator, as an example, by your current employer. You might be called an IT support person. But if your LinkedIn shows IT support and doesn't show Salesforce administrator, then it's it's realistic that you'll be overlooked by people that are searching for Salesforce administrators in the market. To make sure that it's really, really clear that you have been a Salesforce administrator, that your role was doing Salesforce administration, not just generalist IT support. So yeah, just make sure that you're really, again, putting your best foot forward to show what you have and can do. Now, I know Justin's going to go through this in more detail, but there's just a few things that I kind of had prepared and just want to highlight from my side, that I often see. So the one thing that I think is really important is to understand what kind of interview you're actually going into. Never presume that every interview is going to be the same. So whichever type of recruiter you're working with, make sure you understand what their client is expecting from you in the interview. Is it going to be, a role play? Do I need to prepare anything? Is there anything I need to present? Are they going to ask to see any of my work? Get into detail around what you can expect, and don't just take a lack of preparation from the recruiter as an option. Look through the requirements and make sure that you've got a mind, a mental kind of mind map of how you're going to answer questions around their requirements. So prepare examples in advance. It's really easy to forget what you've achieved in the past when you get into an interview. So even if you have to note down some things on a piece of paper, make sure you do that. Research the company. It's really poor form when a client asks you something about the company and you can't answer it. Now, I'm not expecting you to know everything about the company, but if you look at their values, make sure you can actually articulate what they actually do. Any recent news, have they just acquired any companies, things like that. And then the other thing that people forget to do is to research the hiring manager. So where have they worked in the past? Do you know anyone that's worked there? The past roles that they've had, which contacts you might have in common, professional groups they're in, and interests you share. If you know of an interest that you share with the hiring manager, then it's really easy to build commonality and build rapport. And then take some examples of your work. This goes back to my first slide around building your own mini projects to help build your personal brand. So Trailhead is an amazing tool, but Trailhead often tells you you're going to build this, and then there are lots of other people in the market that have also built the same thing as you. If you have worked in an industry before that didn't use Salesforce, but they could have used Salesforce, then in a developer org, spend some time building out a solution that company could have used. This shows that you've taken the initiative. It shows that you can kind of think outside the box and use Salesforce creatively. And if you took that to an interview and showed someone when they were asking you about, where would you have used this product before, or where have you solved a problem, even if you don't have Salesforce experience in a live environment, if you show them in a developer org how you can kind of think and use Salesforce creatively, it will really make you stand out from other candidates that are just telling about what they've done rather than showing.
And before you move on, do you mind if I add a little flavor to that comment? Because it's a really powerful one and a common question about how do I get experience?
Sure.
Ben was just saying to build something in the developer org, and I just want to help fill in a gap that I've heard from some people I'm working with in the last year. He was working on the admin certification. He failed it a couple of times. He was really frustrated. And his mentor, not me, somebody he knew through VetForce, advised him, what about your past jobs? What did you do there? And he described what he had done. He's like, couldn't you build something like that in a dev org and learn these concepts hands-on, using what you know about those jobs you're actually no longer in? And this really helped him. And not only learn, but then he had something built, like Ben was suggesting on that previous slide. And more importantly, he ended up passing his certification on the third attempt. So don't discount your previous job experiences that you're no longer in. These can become your business knowledge that you transform into the platform.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I know people that have been looking to transition their career from like being a hairdresser, working in a salon, as an example. And they used an outdated CRM, I guess it was. And they in their own time built a solution in a developer org that could have been used by that hairdressers. And then think how powerful that is when you sit down in front of a hiring manager and say, I identified that my last company wasn't using a good CRM system. And when I left and I became passionate about Salesforce, I then built this in a Salesforce org that would be an amazing tool for that business to use. Think how powerful that is in comparison to just, oh yeah, I've been working on a few Trailhead modules and done a few super badges. It just shows that you're creative and that you can think outside the box, I guess. And then a couple of questions that you could get asked that I think you have to prepare an answer for. There are certain questions you can't prepare an answer for because you just don't know what to expect. But why do you want to work for this company? I'll give you a clue that the answer shouldn't be because I need a job, but you'll be surprised how many people say that. What do you think? Why do you think you're a strong candidate for this role? what interests you about this position, and how would you approach the first 3 months in the role? So you have to really think about that last one, because obviously you don't know the role inside out before you go in there, but you can have kind of a generalist approach to how you would approach any role, and then try and target and tailor that as much as possible for the particular role that you have. So some key pointers from me through the interview process is to be honest, but show that you want to learn. So over the years I've been recruiting for kind of 13 or so years now, and the one area that candidates fall down most often on in a recruitment process is trying to I guess tell a little white lie around what they've done in the past, because they feel like being honest will mean they won't get the job. And it's so common for a hiring manager to tell me afterwards that I could tell that they hadn't done that before, but they kind of tried to make out that they had. And I'd have been so much more in favor of them just being honest and telling me the truth, and then explaining how they would go about learning that particular topic. So many people actually miss out by telling a little fib when they could just be honest, but show how they would go about solving the problem. Listen. It's not just an opportunity to talk, but also an opportunity to show you can listen. Really listen to what the hiring manager is asking you. Listen for little clues or tips that you can throw into future questions. Just really show that you're listening to what they're asking. And then ask some questions, and make sure you've prepared some in advance, and make sure you ask them, because this shows that you're really interested and keen on the role. And if you don't ask any questions, it can come across as though you weren't interested in the position at all. So yeah, that's an overview of kind of getting started and identifying the path that you want to go down, and then building out your career journey, and approaching recruiters and working with different partners, and ensuring that you're putting your best foot forward with your job application search. So do you want me to do any questions now, JB, or should we hold them for the end?
We'll do it at the end, Ben. But if anybody has any questions to Ben, you can have it. You can post your questions here. You can also unmute yourself and ask him directly. And I see some questions coming in the chat, Ben. I'm going to read out to you. How
Sure.
to build personal relationship with recruiters? Any tips that you suggest?
Yeah, I think so I'll wake up every morning and I have so many messages, and often there's like the same trend is just people just say hi Ben, and then nothing. There's no like question, there's nothing, and like I'll have maybe 10 of those in the morning to reply to. And I think the best way to build a relationship is online. It's no different from if you meet someone in person. I think like you have to try and build some commonality. You have to put something forward that will pique their interest. Like with me as an example, right? If you wanted to build a relationship with me, a great way to do that would be to listen to one of the podcasts that we've released, and then to send me a message about the podcast and tell me what you liked about it, but then also ask a question, because then this is just me. I'm using an example, but it might be that another recruiter's written a blog, or it might be that a recruiter has asked a question recently on their LinkedIn feed. Then it's really important to kind of go back to them with something, or highlight your response to that question, or ask them, why they asked that question. Where did that come from? Like, was it a client was asking that? Just put something forward that's going to get them to engage with you, because if we don't have a relationship with you, it can sometimes be difficult to. We've got so many people that we're speaking to on a daily basis, like just sending a message without much context or much rapport building. It's difficult for me to go back and say hi and start building the rapport on my side when I don't know anything about you. So I think put your best foot forward. I've said that a few times, but it's got to be calculated, right? So tell them what you're looking for. Tell them why you're interested. Tell them what you know about them. Just like you would with any relationship you're trying to build. Just make sure that you're giving something back, and trying to build commonality and rapport.
Yeah, Ben, I want to just add to that one, because it's a favorite question of mine, and I'm a fellow podcast host too. So like, I wish people would tell me if they liked an episode or not. That's like the dream, right? For the last year, I probably only got about 5 to 10 messages in all of 2020 about some of the episodes I released. And that means a lot because we put a lot of work into making those. But that brings up the next point that Ben made about when you're reaching out blind to somebody that you want to connect with, especially on LinkedIn, don't put the work on me, the recipient, to figure out what we're connected about. Like, send a message like Ben suggested, where you offer up, hey, we could be connected about this. It could be anything, a post they just made, a question they asked, like Ben said. It could even be some of your interests, if it's golfing or some board you're on or a nonprofit. It's really anything. At the end of the day, networking is about starting a conversation and keeping that conversation going over years.
Thank you, Ben and Justin. And just in case if you don't know, Ben, he is the director of Talent Global, and he also does a podcast with all the wonderful guests. You can find all the podcasts that he's doing on his LinkedIn page. And Justin, as he said, he also has his podcast, and you can see all the wonderful content in there. Ben and Justin, can you just input the links to your podcast so we can all go and refer to those later on?
Sure.
Yeah, I'll have them up in my deck as well. So.
Okay. And moving on to the next. Sorry, what was that, Ben?
I forgot to add mine to my deck. I apologize.
No issue. So moving on to the next question, Elias was asking if the resume can be reviewed by either of you. So do you think we can do that after the mock interview, or we can take it offline and do it later?
Yeah, I'm happy to review any CVs if people want to send through on LinkedIn to me. I'm happy to give any feedback.
Okay, so I'm gonna share your LinkedIn ID as well in the chat. And the next question is by Rachel. If you want to change the job in 6 to 9 months, should we be starting now itself and reaching out to the recruiters now, or we should do it later? She also mentions that my previous experience is that recruiters will try and sell you on jobs before you are able to leave.
Sure. So I put a post out maybe a year ago, and it worked. Basically, I did some research, and on average, before I'd placed anyone, I think it was the last 20 placements I looked at, and on average, I'd known the particular candidate I placed for more than 2 years when I placed them into the job. So I think every market is different, and I think in Australia specifically, it's very relationship led. So I like to really know the candidates I'm working with before I place them in a job. Not that I don't sometimes place strangers as well. Like I might place someone on the day I first meet them. But I like to form a relationship and really understand what that particular candidate is looking for. So if you were working with me, then now's a great time to reach out to me, because I like to understand what you're looking for, and then over the next 9 months, let's say, I'll keep you informed of what's happening in that space. I might come to you with opportunities and say, look, if you are potentially interested in moving sooner, then here's a great opportunity that kind of aligns to what you're looking for. But just be like, set the scene. If you tell a recruiter that you're looking to move in 9 months, but you're keen to build a relationship now, and you're keen to keep in touch and share updates over the next 9 months and understand what might be out there for you, then they should accept that, and yeah, they should approach it in the right way. If you don't tell them that, then of course they're going to tell you about opportunities right now and try to see if you're ready to move now. But yeah, just be honest and upfront and tell them what you're looking for. And it might be that in the next 9 months, the absolute perfect job comes up. And at least this way, then you'd still be able to hear about it rather than not be told about that role because you haven't reached out to a recruiter yet.
Perfectly makes sense, Ben. The next question is by Vidya. This is about the irrelevant experience to the job. Let's say there is some previous experience which is not related to the job. Should we still list it in the resume in a chronological order, add it as a bullet point, or add it in a separate section like an additional experience? Or how do we approach that?
Personally, I would, if it's completely not relevant, let's say like, you know, you were a soccer player and now you're looking to be a sales, and like, as long as as long as you've had other experience recently that is relevant, then I would just have like at the bottom of the resume, you know, I can forward previous experience before this date, where I operated in roles like soccer player, like list them very briefly. But if there's anything that is relevant from that experience that kind of ties into what you want to do now, and maybe you don't have any other experience that's particularly in line with being a Salesforce professional, then I would take the parts of that role that were relevant and make sure they're highlighted. So is that where you learn to build relationships? Is that where you learn to work under pressure and things like that, and try and tie them into your overall resume? But yeah, I just don't think I would get to if I was reading your resume, I would get to the point where, you know, it becomes irrelevant, and I would then just look at the experience that kind of aligns to what you're looking to do. You just don't want a 10-page resume with 10 years worth of experience where it's all kind of out of date and not in line with what you're actually doing today.
That's wonderful, Ben. And the next question is for someone who is trying to break into the Salesforce ecosystem. Do you suggest to be open to both admin and the developer positions, or just stick with one?
It depends. Like it depends, because if you're passionate about development, then you should be open to development roles. If you think you can become passionate about development, then you should try to learn development. If you don't see yourself being a developer in the future, then there's no real benefit of being a developer right now. Like, I think to be a really good developer and to get lots of opportunities, you have to become passionate about it, and you have to invest a lot of time in being a developer. So that goes back to my points around focus on your strengths and passions, because if you're passionate about working with users and you know, solving problems declaratively, and you want to be the face of the Salesforce platform from a functional perspective, then there's better things to work on than development skills. Like, you could work on your communication, your stakeholder management, you could work on workshopping and running workshops, your presentation skills, as well as your configuration skills, and that would make you a better admin. Therefore, the development path probably isn't right for you if you're not wanting to actually do that.
I want to add to that one as well, because that's the exact question I asked myself 3 years ago. And then I asked my mentor, one of the co-leaders in Minneapolis here, and I still remember what he said. He said, Justin, if you're any good at development, if you think you can pick this up and learn it, go for that straight out. Don't waste your time as an admin. And I actually went against my own mentor's advice. You know, I decided personally, based on how I know my experiences, that I think I need the foundation of being an admin first. And so the last 2 years, I've been an admin as well, and I haven't gone down that developer path yet. And that just brings with it a ton of doubts. Like, should I have done that right off the bat? So here's my retrospective lens on that question and what I've done the last 2 years. I've concluded that I am in the right role now. It's just not what I expected an admin role to be. And so that took some time to learn through experiences, right? And then also, by my own results, in the last 2 years, I've not learned a line of Apex code. You know, so clearly I don't have the curiosity I thought I once had to learn coding. You know, so like, sometimes look at your results too, to see if that tells you a little bit more about who you are. And so I'm very confident I've landed in the right role now. But it was not a straight line, you know, and I felt weird going against my own mentor's advice.
That makes sense, Justin. Thanks for adding your inputs. So the next question is a common one. So when we apply for a job and we don't get any response from the hiring person, the recruiters, and oftentimes we think that we are fit for the position and our resume is so relevant to the job, but still we do not get any call from them. So how do we know what's missing in our resume? How do we know the status? Any thoughts?
I guess so. This depends on like I guess we need some context. Like if you've spoken to anyone at the company before, so is it a recruiter that you've spoken to and then you've sent the CV, or you've just applied on a job board and you've never spoken to anyone? Because this goes back to my point around like job boards aren't they're part of a job search strategy, but they're not a job search strategy in themselves. Like you can't just apply for a job on a job board and that be the solution to your job search problems. Because imagine that we don't know on the other end of that, there might be 500 people that have sent their CV to that job, and no recruiter in the world unfortunately reviews 500 CVs. It just doesn't happen. Like they don't have the time to go through every single CV. So I think it's about being creative and making sure that, you know, are you reaching out in other ways? Like have you sent a direct LinkedIn message to the recruiter? Have you called them? Have you been persistent and followed up? In an ideal world, everyone would get feedback on their job applications, but that, as we all know, that doesn't happen, unfortunately. So it's about taking the direct path and reaching out and trying to really chase feedback yourself, because it could just be that, you know, your CV unfortunately didn't get the time that it deserved in reviewing by the recruiter or the hiring manager because they had so many. It could be that, you know, the recruiter unfortunately found one really good CV in the first few that they reviewed and then sent that one to their client, and unfortunately didn't review every other CV. Like that isn't how I operate, and that's why I'm not a fan of job boards, because you get a lot of people, and unfortunately you upset a lot of people because a lot of people apply for a job and you can't always get back to every single application or review them, and that's why I don't use job boards, because I think it leaves the wrong impression in the market. But had you had that conversation with the recruiter up front, I think it's a lot easier to get feedback. And if you've built a relationship, and if you potentially have that personal brand where you're not just one application, you're a really standout application because they've already seen some of your content on LinkedIn or on Twitter, and that you then go up the list, and I think then you get reviewed sooner. And that again comes back to why the personal brand is so important, and why building relationships with recruiters is really important too.
That's wonderful, Ben. And one of the common question is for somebody who is starting their career in the Salesforce and they don't have any prior experience. So if they were to focus some time on improving their skill set, which one would be better to go for, the super badge or the certification? Which weighs more to the recruiters?
I think they're both good options. I don't think the thing with the certifications and super badges, on their own they don't get you a job. They're like maybe a tick in the box as part of the review process, but they can't be relied on to go from no job to a job just by having a certification or super badge. I think again they're part of the process. I would recommend that you have both. But the thing that people are looking for is experience, right? And unfortunately, this particular person and the person that's asked the question doesn't have that Salesforce experience. And then this comes back to what can you build in a developer org that shows that you can creatively make your own experience. And I would personally, if someone said to me, you know, I've got my certification, I've got my super badge, but here's something I've built in a developer org, that particular thing would pique my interest more than the certification and the super badge, because I'd be really keen to see what they've come up with on their own and solved from a business perspective on their own. But that's not to say you shouldn't have certifications and you shouldn't do super badges, because you should. But it's the kind of creative experience piece that I think a lot of people are lacking, and a lot of people haven't really thought about yet, and that can give you the edge.
Thanks, Ben. We have so many other questions coming in. We'll make sure to answer each of your questions in the chat. But for now, I will take the last question, Ben. This is for somebody who is making a career switch after 12 years of IT industry experience with zero experience in the Salesforce ecosystem. Do you suggest any tips on how they can put their experience, or how they can better put the skills in the resume?
I think if this person could send me their resume, because that would be useful, I can then give some direct feedback. But like, if you've got 12 years IT experience, there's going to be a lot of stuff in there that is really relevant to the Salesforce ecosystem. And it's about like what have you done before that you can bring into the ecosystem? Like what have you solved before? What have you learned that can really translate into Salesforce? And then how can you showcase that by, again, building something in a Salesforce developer org that shows you can bring that experience across? That's really, really important. I think it's not just leaning on, because there are lots of people that have transitioned into Salesforce without an IT background. So you already have an advantage there that you can showcase that you understand IT and the different concepts, and you've performed in these roles for the last 12 years. Now it's about showcasing, well, what can you do in Salesforce that can really help make that switch as quick as possible.
Thanks, Ben, for all your patience answering these questions. This is so enlightening. And thank you, Justin, for answering the questions in the chat window.